The Kalam cosmological argument is a cosmological argument for the existence of a god, or at least a creative force, developed by Muslim scholars throughout the 13th century AD, but popularized by contemporary Christian apologist William Lane Craig. It seeks to argue primarily that the universe has a cause, and then some people extrapolate from there that that cause is, for example, all good, all powerful, or God. It is a cosmological argument. That means it's based on the existence of the universe and contingency. Specifically, it's based on what caused the universe to begin to exist. So, the first premise of the Kalam is that all things which begin to exist have a cause. This premise is defended through common sense, and if you believe it to not be true, if you reject this premise, then you would expect things. One of the primary things you would expect is that things would happen or just come into existence with no cause. This does not happen. Nothing just happens for no cause. A teapot does not just drop on my head right now for no reason. It does not just spawn in and drop. Nothing begins to exist without a cause in general. And this is the view that the Kalam requires. There are some objections to this. The second premise is that the universe began to exist. This is supported by the Big Bang. The current model we have for the beginning of the universe implies that, well, the universe began to exist. It did not always exist. It is not an infinite regress. If you think it has an infinite past, it comes with a lot of complications and a lot of points you have to defend that I don't think you would want to. I'll address them later, though. But the conclusion the argument seeks to draw is that the universe has a cause. It seems like a little, but it means a lot, because the cause cannot be natural, because otherwise the universe would have to already exist. It can't be within the universe. So this cause must be something beyond what is natural. The cause cannot be gravity. It cannot be me. It cannot be anything random. The cause has to be not natural. The cause must be immaterial. The reason the cause must be immaterial is because if it was material, then the universe would have to already exist. There would have to already be matter. Matter did not exist before the creation of the universe. Some people want to argue for things like a personal creator or the unicity of the first cause, but I'll address those later as well. The defense of premise one, which is that things do not begin to exist for no reason, or everything that begins to exist has a cause, is generally based on a reductio ad absurdum of imagining the opposite. Imagine for a minute that things can exist or come into existence with no cause. You would expect this to actually happen, but it doesn't. If it did, it would collapse a lot of science and reason, because how can you test anything if things just could happen for no reason? How could I run a test and not know that the result was not just some random uncaused thing? It's also because nothing lacks discriminatory power, meaning that, like, if there is no cause, why do we have this universe? Why don't we have a different universe? Why don't we have a goat? Why don't we have coffee? Sorry, by that I mean, why is there not literally just a pot of coffee instead of the universe? Nothing cannot discriminate, right? If there was no cause, we would equally expect to see a universe as we would a singular pot of coffee. But clearly it's more rational that a universe would exist than a singular pot of coffee and no universe. However, a personal being or a greater cause would have a reason to make it the universe rather than just a pot of coffee or a chicken. Some of the most common objections to premise one are quantum mechanics based, which is that quantum fluctuations seemingly happen for no reason and have no cause. I do not have the knowledge to explain that thoroughly, but what I do know is that it's an objection. It says, well, there is something that happens without a cause, so maybe that argument's not true. But to me, the strongest objection to premise one of the Kalam is called the fallacy of composition. It asserts that just because everything in the universe has a cause does not mean the universe has a cause. So, for example, no atom is alive, therefore nothing made of atoms is alive. That's not true. I'm made of atoms. I'm alive. A similar one is that a house of small bricks does not have to be small. Just because every brick is small does not mean that the house is small. 1,000,000 small bricks is big. So who says 1,000 caused things, a billion caused things, a trillion caused things needs a cause for their initial thing, right? Otherwise, you would expect that nothing could be alive because atoms aren't alive and everything's made of atoms. So we don't know if causation follows if causation is intensive or extensive. It depends on size, it depends on quantity, it depends on what it is. Like the brick example, right? Like this density of bricks remains the same, but the mass of them changes if you have enough of them. So therefore, a universe of caused things could be uncaused, and everything in the universe is still caused. The universe itself just does not need a cause. This is the strongest objection to premise one, in my opinion. The fallacy of composition. Now on to premise 2, which is, if you remember, that the universe began to exist. The primary defenses of it are scientific, but there are some very interesting philosophical ones. The primary scientific one is just the current scientific understanding. We believe the Big Bang to have happened, and the Big Bang promotes the fact that the universe had to have a beginning. Also note that the observable universe is finite. We can see out for 13.8 billion light years, which gives us the idea that the universe is 13.8 billion years old. If it were any older, or if it had existed forever, right, then we would expect to be able to have an infinite observable universe. Well, the observable universe is not infinite, it's finite, because the universe has existed for a finite amount of time. There are some objections to premise 2, but more importantly, it's a philosophical defense of premise 2, which is my favorite defense of premise 2 because science is difficult to comprehend. The first point is that an infinite regress is just not sufficient. So imagine, for example, you had a train, right? And the train had an infinite amount of boxcars, and it was moving. No engine, no locomotive. It was just moving with an infinite amount of boxcars. This doesn't make sense why it would move. We need some kind of first cause. We need something to cause the universe. And for that, we need the universe would need to exist. It cannot just exist because it existed in the past. It existed forever. That doesn't make sense. An infinite past also gives you some necessary assumptions that, in my opinion, are rather indefensible. For example, that means that all possible things have existed. That is what it means to have an infinite past. So all possible things that could have happened have already happened. That means that at some point in the past, even if it was 800 quintillion years ago, somebody lived your exact life with your exact name and your exact attributes in the exact place you are now. There was a world, a universe in the past in which we had this exact planet with the exact same people. Everything was the same. Or everything was the same but a little bit different. So, for example, Queen Elizabeth died 3 days later. The Niners won the Super Bowl this year and didn't get slimed out by the Seahawks. Or Berto ends up with Becca. Any of those number of things would happen in an alternate universe where everything else is the exact same. This is just a ridiculous idea it's just ridiculous to comprehend. I would deny this on principle, although it doesn't make it untrue, but it's something you would have to admit. You would have to admit that everything that could happen has already happened. Every single version of your life and every single life that has ever been played out has already happened in the past. Literally everything. Every single thing. A dog has been elected president of the United States 8 billion quintillion years ago. A second point is that if the past was infinite, we would never get to the present because you cannot traverse an infinity. Imagine the past like a straight line, and we have an infinite amount behind us. That would mean we've walked an infinite distance. One cannot walk an infinite distance. Therefore, the past cannot be infinite. The existence of an actual infinity is also refuted through examples like Hilbert's Hotel. I don't think I can get into that or provide a thorough explanation, but I'll link something in the description about it. It basically proposes that if you assume actual infinities exist, you get some crazy things like that some infinities are bigger than others. For example, there are an infinite number of integers. There are also an infinite number of real numbers. But there are more real numbers than there are integers. This would give the conclusion that some infinities are bigger than others. That doesn't make sense. How would one infinity be bigger than another? I also need to address objections to premise 2. So why would the universe not have a beginning? Why would it have always existed? Well, 1, the law of conservation of matter and energy. So energy cannot be created, nor can it be destroyed. For the universe to have popped into existence, energy had to be created or destroyed. This violates the laws of physics. So that is an objection. I believe it to be a weak objection, because if we assume a God exists, then that God can violate the laws of physics as he pleases because he is not bound by them. Another objection is the ability of a timeless creator to create something in a specific time. So God exists outside of time. How could he create something at a specific time? If God created the universe, would he have not created it for all eternity? How could he create something at a specific time if he is not within time himself? The strongest objection, in my opinion, is a different theory of time. I'll explain it using the analogy of the North Pole. But the theory basically argues that it does not make sense to say what was before the Big Bang, because the Big Bang was the creation of time as we know it, right? It's like if you go to the North Pole, well, there's obviously somewhere more north than where I am, and there's somewhere more north than where you are. But if you go to the North Pole, it doesn't make any sense to ask, how do I go more north? So when you go back in time, once you get to the Big Bang, that's the origin of all time. So how would you get back? So everything is 13.8 billion years old. There is nothing before it. There does not need to be anything before it because there does not need to be anything more north than the North Pole. This objection allows you to maintain that the universe did not come into existence, while also maintaining that there's no infinite regress and that there is no infinite past, and therefore there are no infinite possibilities and all these crazy assumptions. You need to defend it through other methods. It is the strongest objection to the second premise of the Kalam. The conclusion is that the universe has a cause. This is undeniable if you accept the first two premises. You cannot refute this if you accept the first two premises because it is just a valid syllogism. A syllogism is an argument with two premises and a conclusion. For example, Socrates is a man. Oh, I said it backwards, but all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Conclusion, Socrates is immortal. That is a valid syllogism. This is also one. All things which begin to exist need a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. If you accept the two premises, you must accept the conclusion. You can deny the two premises, but this conclusion that the universe has a cause is undeniable from the syllogism. From it, we can derive a stronger link to the biblical God or to the God of Abrahamic religions, but these points are also contestable. The first one I'll make is that the creator of the universe must be immaterial, or not the creator, I guess I can't imply that yet, I'm making the question, is that whatever caused the universe must be immaterial, because if it was material, it would already exist in the universe, and the universe does not exist. All material things are in the universe, therefore the creator of the universe must be outside the universe, must be immaterial. Creator of the universe must be uncaused itself, or the thing that created the universe must be uncaused, because if it had a cause, then it would have an infinite regress, and then we get back to where we started. Note that this assumes that something can be uncaused. It gives special treatment. It says that something can be uncaused because it never began to exist. So, for example, God in this argument never began to exist. God has always existed. In a Christian worldview, at least, you can object to that, of course. We also get the unicity of the first cause through Occam's razor, which is that the simplest explanation is the most probable explanation. For example, if you lose your keys, it's more likely that you misplaced them because that's simple than that the FBI swatted your house and they raided it and they stole your keys specifically and they put everything back together. That's a ridiculous assumption. Nobody would ever think that. It's possible, but it's a ridiculous assumption. Occam's razor lets us say, well, the most obvious one is probably true. So it's more obvious that there's one cause than 20 causes because it just makes more sense. Why would there be 20 causes when there could just be one? Why would 20 people have broken into your house when one person could break into your house, right? Note that this doesn't guarantee the truth. It's merely probabilistic. It doesn't say there cannot be 20 causes, there cannot be 20 gods, but it just says, well, why would there be 20? You only need one. The next claims of the Kalam are the strongest link to the biblical God and also the easiest to refute, or they have the most refutability. Not that they're easy to refute, but they have the most refutability. First one is that the creator of the universe must be personal. So why must it be personal? It seems like nothing in this argument gives you that. But there are two kinds of, one argument for this is that there are two kinds of immaterial things that are also timeless. Your mind and an abstract thing. An abstract thing would be like the number 2 or the number 16 or the feeling of happiness. No abstract thing has creative power. The number 2 cannot create the universe. Only a person can create the universe, a personal being. Well, sorry, it needs to be timeless and immaterial. We've already established this. Wait, did I establish timeless? The argument for why it needs to be timeless is because it must exist outside of time because time is part of the universe's creation, so it must be immaterial and timeless, right? So there are only two things that are timeless and immaterial, and abstract things and personal things, or like personal beings, right? Personal beings have creative power. I can create something. I can't create the universe from nothing, but I can create a drawing. abstract things have no creative power. The number 2 has never created anything. The number 2 itself, the number 2 has never made anything. The number 3 has not made anything either, nor has the concept of happiness. So, since an abstract object cannot cause anything, it must be a personal being that caused something. Some other conclusions are that the cause must have creative power. That's the second big one. This conclusion is often objected to through a number of means. The first is that not all causes have creative power. If I pick something up and drop it, why did it fall? It fell because of gravity. Gravity has no creative power. Gravity does not create anything from nothing. I know it shapes planets, of course, but just stick with the analogy. There are things that do not have creative power that cause things. Omnipotence is also not flow from creative power. Just because something created the universe does not make it omnipotent. It could be a single force that created the universe, doesn't mean it's omnipotent. It could be a God who has the power to create the universe, but he doesn't have the power to create humans. Let's just say, right? That's possible. So we do not get omnipotence immediately, but it's a strong case for omnipotence because it must have a strong enough creative power to create the entire universe. But he might not be able to create something. We don't know it's omnipotent just because he created the universe. Just because he created something doesn't mean you can create everything in it. I don't know a good analogy for it, but it should just make conceptual sense, I would hope. Another prominent conclusion is that the creative force or the creator must be good. I guess I'll say personal creator because we've already established the personal thing. So there are two meanings of something being good. It can, 1, work well. So a car engine is good, not because it is ethical, not because it's a nice person, but because it goes fast. That makes a car engine good. Turns on, that makes it good. A battery's good because it has a long life. Doesn't mean it's ethical. So that's one meaning. The other meaning is the other meaning, ethical. It's morally good. So I will argue that the creator must be good in the sense of a car engine because the universe was created. And if the creator was not good, then the universe would not be created. If the creative force was not good at its job of creating the universe, there would be no universe. Therefore, it must be good at creating universes. So it's good in that sense. And the argument for why it's good in the moral sense is more objectable in my opinion. I will address my favorite objection to it, but the argument is that the creative force must lack nothing in this universe because it created the entire universe, therefore it cannot lack anything. Evil is the lack of good. This is the thing I would object to, but evil is the lack of good. There is only evil when there is no good. So, because it does not lack anything, it does not lack good, it cannot have evil, and therefore it must be infinitely good. I would argue that evil is not always the lack of good. For example, is the Holocaust really a lack of liking the Jewish people? No, it's a human atrocity. It's not a lack of my appreciation for them. It would be a human atrocity, not all evil in my opinion, and in the opinion of somebody objecting to this premise. You can still establish an omnibenevolent God through other premises, but the Kalam, I would argue, does not, because evil is not merely a lack of good. It is more than a lack of good. You can still claim that evil is a lack of good, but I would argue against that. The Kalam at its absolute strongest, based on everything I've just addressed, proves a single, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, powerful, good, and personal creator of the universe. All of these properties represent the Abrahamic God, or the Christian God, the Muslim God, the Jewish God. Not that they're identical, but they have similar properties. And at minimum, if you accept the premises, it affirms that the universe had a cause. This cause could be not personal. You can object. So all these premises, I'm hoping that I've given you a way to object to every premise that I've discussed earlier. And because of that, you can argue against these things. But if you accept the first two premises, not the sub-conclusions, but the first two premises, you must accept the conclusion and you must say the universe had a cause. If you do not believe in God, you can still bite the bullet and say, well, this cause might not be personal. This cause doesn't have to be single. You can object to the fact that Occam's razor is probabilistic and object to the whole abstract concept and just say, well, that doesn't make conceptual sense. It's wrong. There's something, find some flaw in it. But you still have to acknowledge, if you accept the two premises, that the universe had a cause. So the Kalam at its strongest leads to the biblical or the Abrahamic God, and at its weakest gives you the fact that the universe had a cause. Objections to the premises of the Kalam are largely counterintuitive, but a lot of them are logical. The strongest, in my opinion, is the fallacy of causation. The fallacy of composition. Well, that's about it. Um, hope you enjoy. Hope you learn something. And that's the Kalam for you.